I've spent all of my formative years throughout high school, throughout college, looking to the president, who I'm supposed to be able to look up to, and seeing somebody who's trying to place blame on the left, who's amping up the rhetoric constantly. And yeah, it's not good.
So you think it's Donald Trump's fault that a deranged leftist climbed up to the top of a building and shot up the ICE facility, not once now, but twice in Texas?
I think it's Donald Trump's fault that America has gotten to this heated place. I think that
no responsibility for the radicalization on the left that's causing this violent outburst.
That 29-year-old is radicalized by online communities and online algorithms. I'm not going to blame that directly on Trump, but he was caught in a lot of online video game algorithms and all these communities. Donald Trump,
but it's Trump's
10
fault.
years ago, Donald Trump amped up the tension in America.
So he ran 10 years ago, and this guy then 10 years later, somehow you're connecting. Can't you just take responsibility for it?
Oh,
on the left.
But let's not do the he has to take responsibility because he's a Democrat.
I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber. You want me to take more responsibility than the president of the United States?
I want you to understand.
I'm a 22-year-old YouTuber.
I want you to understand that we are in the middle of an epidemic of left-wing violence. They're attacking ICE. They shot Charlie. It's happening all over the country. We have these Free Palestine people running around trying to burn down the Pennsylvania governor's mansion. On and on
then
and
maybe
on.
The president
it's not Trump's fault.
Boy. So once again, we got to talk about the lies that are being spread, the rampant lies on these left-wing platforms, right? And I guess this is what happens when you're losing, right? When you're losing, you have no choice but to lie, okay? You have no choice but to gaslight. You have no choice but to make up things, to not live in reality. And I think that's what's happening, right? And we've seen this with Charlie Kirk, okay? These individuals on the left, they've openly celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who is a conservative civil rights activist. And in order to justify the celebrations, they've had to lie and make up things that Charlie Kirk said, even though he didn't actually really say those things, right? And Adam Mockler here, who is a creation of the Midas Touch Network. So understand, this guy is a trained propagandist, right? They found a 24-year-old. Again, this guy is no different than Harry Sisson and all of the other paid Democrat Party propagandists. But apparently, Midas Touch did not coach Adam Mockler on how to lie very well, right? Or how to defend his lies in the face of actual pushback against the lies from somebody who knows that what he's saying is a lie and not true, okay? As Adam Mockler is going to lie about Charlie Kirk's viewpoints on the Civil Rights Act. Because again, they have to paint this picture that it's okay to celebrate the death of Charlie Kirk, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, because Charlie Kirk was a racist, right? He was a racist who didn't want black people to vote. This is essentially what AOC argued on the floor in Congress as she voted against honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk, right? And condemning political violence. So I want to react to this clip of Chris Cuomo shutting this guy down because, again, I think this is just another example of how leftist lies are so bad that I'm not even sure that they believe their lies, but they've convinced themselves that their lies are truth. And when confronted with any pushback, they fall apart. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
A lot of young dudes, for example, that I talk to who are just sick and feel suffocated of the party because they think it's two things. Number one, a little bit too finger waggy. But at the same time, while they're finger wagging, it's like risk averse. So the Democratic politicians always seem risk averse. Donald Trump is not risk averse. He'll go into any space, anybody with a microphone, he'll go debate and talk to you.
Because his own won't attack him and yours will.
That is one of the problems with our media ecosystem that we can get to. On the right, everybody from Nick Fuentes to Candace Owens to Ben Shapiro lines up at the end. But on the left, you know Hassan Piker, one of our biggest creators, he's a cool dude and I've watched him before, but during election time, he did not say to vote for Kamala. Our biggest creator on the left was not advocating to vote for Kamala.
Okay, again, just another example of these people not knowing what the hell they're talking about, right? Here's the thing, right? I actually watch the left and the right equally. And the reason why I do this is because I feel like it gives me a very accurate understanding of the political spectrum. This dude is basically saying there's no infighting on the right. Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Tucker, everybody on the right, Bishop, they're all on the same page. That could be the farthest thing from the truth that I've ever heard, right? I mean, any just cursory scrolling of X, right-wing X, will show you that that's just not true. Nick Fuentes did not support President Trump in 2024, right? In fact, Nick Fuentes explicitly said he will not vote for Trump.
I will not vote for Trump, and I'm not voting for him now. I am not voting for Joe Biden and Mitt Romney and Charlie Kirk's immigration policy, which is stapling green cards to diplomas. I'm not voting for millions of legal Indian immigrants to take our high-value jobs. I'm not voting for infinity legal immigrants. I'm not voting for a war with Iran. I'm not voting for Jared Kushner to run the administration with Howard Lutnick and Peter Thiel and Rick Grinnell and the Log Cabin Republicans. I'm not voting for abortion. I won't do it. They took away my right to process credit cards. For a time, they took away my right to fly on an airplane. I'm banned from CPAC. I'm banned from the GOP.
That does not sound like Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro. That doesn't sound like they're all on the same page, right? Nick Fuentes campaigned against Trump, right? Like, he explicitly told his followers, do not support Trump. But according to this guy, Adam Mockler, who apparently is ignorant of all of this, well, see, you don't understand. On the right, everybody's kind of lined together, right? There's no infighting. They don't attack each other, disagree on anything. But see, on the left, we're always disagreeing, right? Our top creator, Hassan Piker, didn't support Kamala. And it's like, your understanding of the political spectrum, politics, is rudimentary at best. It's wrong, right? It's wrong. It's ignorant. It's ignorant, okay? And for whatever reason, you have CNN platforming this ignorance. But then again, they're ignorant as well too, right? To how the actual political spectrum is currently set up, right? Like the actual political environment that we're in, right? And I feel like I have a really good understanding of it because I literally watch everybody you can think of, anybody you can think of, right? I probably watched their content and I probably have watched it quite a bit, right? Because that's how I learn. That's how I get a better understanding of the current political environment, which clearly this guy is ignorant of, right? It really is. It blows my mind that people like this guy, right, are getting platformed on CNN when this dude doesn't know what he's talking about, right? He's literally just repeating talking points that he's been coached to repeat from Midas Touch. There's nothing here. There's no depth here. There's no real knowledge. There's no life experience. He doesn't know anything, to be honest with you.
Meanwhile, on the right, they all completely line up. So people in my age cohort, and I think throughout the party too, just think that we've gotten lame, too risk averse, and we need to be in these spaces making these arguments. Not saying we're going to kick the shit out of people. I don't know if it might have actually said that, but not saying that. But I think that going and actually presenting the argument in a good faith way, not going to lie, the Charlie Kirk model, what Charlie Kirk was doing worked very well. And it's created this cultural dominance for the right. It's this theory that I have called the pipeline to volume theory in the algorithm. And I've seen this happen where a lot of young men who are looking up dating advice, for example, like say every young dude has dating problems at some point. You get sucked down this Andrew Tate pipeline, this rabbit hole. And before you know it, you're watching Andrew Tate. What about my friends that just work out? They like working out, so they're watching reels on that. Then they get sucked down this pipeline to make America healthy again, meaning vaccines and Tylenol, blah, 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 all this stuff. There's also this pipeline with young mothers where young mothers just had a baby, are now getting pulled down this sort of anti-vax, like weird health pipeline. And then once you're down that, they hit you with so much volume, you can't escape it. Think of Elon Musk's Twitter feed. If you've ever scrolled through it, he posts 100 times a day, right? 100 tweets a day with millions of views. That's the volume. So on the right, you were saying earlier that Joe Rogan doesn't speak to the many, he still speaks to the few. And I do agree, actually. I agree a lot that us on social media, we're all speaking to.
But it gets amplified.
It gets amplified, and there's a cultural shift. You asked at the very beginning why I think it's important for us to talk about Charlie Kirk's beliefs when he just passed away. And I think we see this insidious amplification of his beliefs throughout the culture, throughout young men, young women, people of all ages that are now getting this amplified. And I think it's very important to be out there and be like, listen, Charlie Kirk shouldn't have gotten shot. Obviously, that's terrible. He got like publicly executed. It was terrible. But at the same time, this is a dude who repeatedly said the Civil Rights Act shouldn't have been passed.
No, not at the same time. Two things.
Yeah.
You're about to make the AOC mistake. And to be very clear, I say this all the time, but you got to say everything 100 fucking times. I think she's one of your best in terms of personal political cachet. I don't know if she's one of your leaders, and I don't know that you win a major election with her pushing socialism and a higher tax burden.
She's like a democratic socialist. I don't like the word socialism either, but
it's high taxes.
Yeah, no, I get
and
it.
It's a tough sell.
Well,
pragmatic. But hold on.
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk never said the Civil Rights Act. I've studied this very deeply, and it's pretty simple. It'll take you 5 minutes. It's not what he said.
I've looked it up.
What he said was, Civil Rights Act, good, needed it, great.
No.
Was then used to inculcate DEI and do these other things by extension of that law that he was against, and that it should have never been used for those purposes. Not to help black people vote. That's he believed in. But to make it as an extension of a welfare program for blacks in every manifestation, that he was against.
Yep.
Now, I happen to disagree. I actually think it was necessary.
No, I've heard him make that argument.
He didn't say get rid of it.
I've heard him
Never
make that
should have
argument.
passed it.
I didn't say he said get rid of it. He said they never should have passed it. And he also he said that, right? They never should have passed it in the first place. And he made also.
No, I don't think he did say that. I think what he said was the way that what they did with it made it a mistake.
I did a lot of research on this because I wanted to make sure he actually said this. And essentially, he also made this other argument that black Americans committed a lot less crime and there were more households with both parents before the Civil Rights Act, which is actually true if you look up the statistics, but it's a lot more complicated than he made it out to be.
Not because they didn't have rights.
No, so it's very complicated, but this is what Charlie Kirk would do. He would bundle.
That's a straw man argument.
He would bundle these arguments together. He would say the Civil Rights Act shouldn't have been passed. Yeah, I think that was his view. And he said it accelerated DEI being integrated into the workforce. He said that a lot. But then he would also make these arguments like black Americans committed way less crime and there were less fatherless households before the Civil Rights Act. So you can't blame someone if they get confused when Charlie Kirk is making all of these arguments.
I just think the way to do it.
Yeah. So what you just watched here, right, is an individual go from being sure that Charlie Kirk said that the Civil Rights Act should have never been passed, which he did not say, right? Being sure that Charlie Kirk said all these things, right? Which, again, just left-leaning talking points that you literally hear on TikTok, right? Of individuals taking Charlie Kirk out of context, putting words in his mouth, not playing the full context of what he said. He went from being sure to, well, I think that he said these things, despite the fact that he also claims that, well, I did a lot of research to make sure that he said these things. But I think, right? You don't know. You didn't listen to what Charlie Kirk said. And the reason why I know you didn't listen to what he said is because you're quite literally making things up. If you listen to what he said, it is very clear that Chris Cuomo's interpretation of what Charlie Kirk actually said is a lot closer to the reality of what Charlie Kirk said than what Adam Mockler is saying. Take a look.
If you had the opportunity, you would get rid of the Civil Rights Act?
No, I think you should have a one-page bill that says that racial discrimination based on race is illegal and will not be tolerated in the United States of America. I would simplify it. I would not have all. So what happened is that the Civil Rights Act has 9 different titles in it, and you have this leviathan that was created. And something that most black Americans don't support is men and female sports. Would you agree?
Wait, say that again?
Men playing in female sports.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, I know. No, for sure, right? Believe it or not, the Civil Rights Act is now being used to keep men playing in women's sports. So the Civil Rights Act was used to help black America originally. Totally get that. But now the way it was written is that any claim of identification, so someone says, I'm a woman, therefore I can compete in your volleyball team, they come in with a civil rights claim. And so what we're saying is, no, it should be specified to racial, not gender, all that other stuff. And there were all these other provisions as well.
Here's the most important thing, and I'm not saying it's because of this, but black America was getting richer, they were getting stronger, and families were largely still put together before the Great Society, Voting Rights Act, and Civil Rights Act. 60 years later, black America is in a worse position. I'm not saying it's because of the Civil Rights Act, I'm not saying it's because of the Voting Rights Act, but somewhere something went awry. And now we have more conversations about race. We have more fixation on race than any other time in my adult life. The promise was that we were going to get a colorblind America. And to offer an olive branch to some of my conservative friends that still lift up MLK, they want to lift up MLK because they want to turn the page on race. And I'm totally on that program. What I'm trying to counter is the reason we talk about race so much is because we have a federal holiday to a guy that talked about race all the time. We celebrate the Civil Rights Act more than the American founding, and that we have this continuation of multi-decades of building and building and building, where then in the 90s you get Derek Bell and Intro to Critical Race Theory. You get Patrice Cullors in the 1619 Project.
The reality of the Civil Rights Act and how it's being used is making it harder for us to pursue excellence as a society. Here's a fact. Since the Civil Rights Act passed, I think that it's fair to say,
any sort of racist sentiments that are in America have gone, at least individually amongst white people. Most people would think that color blindness is in the Civil Rights Act, but it's not.
Well, so the literal text implies, it doesn't say colorblind, but it says don't discriminate on race.
That's the moral promise that most people would think, but instead you get this anti-racist beast.
Exactly.
And I just want to make sure if you support it, that's okay. We're not criticizing you. We ask you to reconsider the reality of what it actually is, not this abstraction that you've been living under.
Yeah, so clearly in the context, right, of the arguments Charlie Kirk made in regards to the Civil Rights Act, he is not saying that the Civil Rights Act should not have been passed, right? That's not what he's saying. In fact, what he said is that the Civil Rights Act should have been narrower and should have focused only on preventing racial discrimination, and that the Civil Rights Act has been abused by other groups of people in order to push agendas that were not intended by the legislation in the first place, that the spirit of the legislation is not being upheld, right? It's not being fulfilled. In fact, what we have is not less racism, which again was the intent of the Civil Rights Act. We have more racism. And one of the reasons why is because the Civil Rights Act, at least some portions of it that were overly broad, were a mistake, right? That is a more accurate representation of Charlie Kirk's argument. But see, if you listen to these leftists try to frame what he said about the Civil Rights Act, they will have you thinking that Charlie Kirk, he wants to go back to segregation, right? He wants black folks and white folks to be segregated, right? And then, as Adam Mockler is bringing up here, well, see, he said that blacks were had stronger families and they were essentially better off, right, under segregation. It's like, no. Again, context of what Charlie Kirk was saying was that despite segregation, right, you had a stronger black family unit, you had lower crime rates, you had Black America, at the very least, achieving some economic success, right, catching up with white America, right, in some aspects when you talk about wages, things like that, right, business ownership, just being more self-reliant, right, just from a cultural standpoint, in a much better place, right, than the current state of Black America. And that was before the Civil Rights Act. And he used that as an example of how the Civil Rights Act is not living up to the intentions. The intentions were to make Black America better, right? But we haven't necessarily seen that happen in the black community, right? Especially when you talk about family structure, when you talk about crime, when you talk about culture, when you talk about, like, that is what he's saying. He's just talking about how the Civil Rights Act did not live up to expectations, and part of the reason why is because it was overly broad. Now, I don't know if that's too complicated for these leftists, these liberals to understand, right? Maybe Charlie Kirk was too nuanced. Maybe he was making too much of an intellectual argument in order for these people to understand. But to take what he says out of context and then to present it as if it's fact and to claim that you did all this research, I know for certain that he said this, even though he didn't say that. Again, it just really shows you how easy it is to be a left-wing commentator. You don't have to be factually correct. You don't have to know what you're talking about. You can just say whatever the audience agrees with, whatever their worldview is, you can just say it, and it doesn't matter if it's actually true, right? It really blows my mind. It is much easier to come out here and to take somebody out of context and to try to make it seem like he's a racist, that he said all these terrible things, instead of actually having a nuanced discussion about his actual criticism of the Civil Rights Act, which honestly at the day can be criticized, right? The Civil Rights Act is not some piece of legislation that you can't criticize, right? You can't say anything bad about, okay? There are pros and cons to every piece of legislation. There's no legislation out there that's 100% good. There's no legislation out there that's 100% bad. The truth, again, is always somewhere in the middle, right? In regards to the trade-offs of certain pieces of legislation. That's just the reality of the situation, right? But again, if you present that type of nuance, it's hard to present Charlie Kirk as some type of flaming racist who, you know, hey, it's okay to celebrate him being assassinated, right? It's hard to do that. That's not what the left-wing audience wants to hear, right? They don't want to hear the nuance of what Charlie Kirk was actually talking about, right? They don't want to hear that. What they want to hear is that Charlie Kirk said that the Civil Rights Act should be repealed and it never should have been passed because he doesn't want black people to vote. He was a flaming racist. When that's not what he said. In fact, he actually was explicitly against racism, right? He said that part of it was good, right? The ending racism, racial segregation, that was actually the good part of it, right? That's actually what he said. But notice how they never mentioned that part. They never mentioned that part where he says the ending racial discrimination good, right? That part of it good, okay? But it should have been just that. It's too overly broad. Again, I don't know if it's too complex for these people to understand, or, again, that's just not how you rile up your left-wing base, right? That's not what the left-wing base wants to hear. They don't want to hear nuance. They want to hear simpleton, overly exaggerated arguments about why Charlie Kirk was a bad person and why it's okay to celebrate him being assassinated, right? That's what they want to hear, and that's what these people are really leaning into. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.